Thanks, Steve. We're just 29 days away now from heading over the fiscal cliff, and lawmakers are struggling to find that common ground. Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner appearing on 5 Sunday shows to respond to the deadlock. Here he is on Fox News Sunday.
Last question. Can you promise that we will not go over the cliff?
No, I can't promise that. That's a decision that lies in the hands of the Republicans that are now opposing increases in tax rates. If they recognize the reality that we can't afford to extend those tax rates, then we have the basis for an agreement to be very good for the American people.
But if this blame game continues, could a fiscal cliff fallout sink one party and elevate the other? Joining me now for a fair and balanced debate is our Washington insiders, Democratic strategist Margie Omero, and spokesperson for American Majority Action, Ron Meyer. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
All right, Ron, let me start with you, because I'm struck by the fact that Tim Geithner, as Treasury Secretary, is so political in these discussions and actually calling out Republicans. Is that normal?
Well, I think he's on his way out the door, and I think he's covering for President Obama because they want these negotiations to fail. Howard Dean said on Bill Maher's HBO show that this is actually the best deal progressive Democrats are going to get. He said that, and I agree with him. If you look at this fiscal cliff and the deal that they're talking about, or even like what happens if we go off the cliff, it really is a DNC platform. You get higher taxes, you cut defense spending, and domestic spending stays about the same. Isn't that what their platform is? They want us to go off this fiscal cliff. And I think that the reason why they're sending Tim Geithner out is because if negotiations fail, then President Obama won't get blamed because he's not the one actually negotiating. It's one of his surrogates. It's not Joe Biden. It's not the chief of staff. It's not President Obama. It's someone else.
Margie, it sounds like that's kind of right. I mean, other than the middle class getting hit with the tax hike, isn't everything that Ron just talked about part of the DNC platform?
Other than that, I mean, that's a really big issue. I mean, President Obama and really American people don't want to see middle-class Americans pay an additional $2,000 in taxes, which is what would happen if we went off the fiscal cliff, in addition to a whole host of other cuts to programs, a safety net that people really need that we don't want to cut. Democrats don't want to cut, and the American people don't want to see cut. I think there's a few things here. First, more Americans say they would blame Republicans in a series of polls. They would blame Republicans and not President Obama if we went off the fiscal cliff. So right. I think that's a motivation for everybody really to come to the table. Yeah. I do think.
But why do they feel? But Ron, why do they feel that way? Why does the
Margie,
American public
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. They're looking at polls and saying, well, Republicans are gonna get blamed, so why not run us right off the cliff? And playing politics with the American economy is not the right thing to do. And playing politics
Republicans should have their own plan that the American people support. Exit polls show a majority. I'm sorry, let me finish. A majority of Americans in exit polls and in subsequent polls have said we should balance the budget by asking the wealthiest among us to pay a little bit more. And
nothing's going to be balanced, so Marjorie.
People who employ our generation.
Wait, guys. Wait, Ron. Wait, Ron.
I've been waiting.
That's not true. Nothing's going to be balanced with any kind of talks that I've heard about. Nothing. Because guess what? The federal government doesn't have to balance a budget.
The only spending cuts are for war spending that are already going to be. It's for Afghanistan and Iraq. We're already pulling out. That's half the spending cuts that they're counting.
$600 billion in spending cuts in health care. That's just one piece of it.
We need real entitlement reform to save our generation. And frankly, we shouldn't be taxing the people who are giving our generation jobs. Young people young people have mass unemployment, and this plan is terrible.
In exit polls, and that's what this election was about.
Can I please talk about how our generation is getting hammered, and if we don't have entitlement reform, we're going to have to pay this debt off. Okay. We're going to have to pay this debt off in the future. Interest payments are already $3,000 per taxpayer.
That is Ron.
Skyrocketing.
Okay, so now that's Ron's opinion. Margie, respond to why there are not more spending cuts in Tim Geithner's plan.
There are spending cuts in Tim Geithner's plan. I mean, it's a balanced approach that has spending cuts and revenue increases. And I think
what spending cuts?
The challenge is $600 billion in healthcare spending cuts for one thing, and additional $1 trillion in other spending cuts.
Exactly.
They're in there. Well, they're in the plan,
but there's nothing new for spending cuts. That's my point.
Where's the compromise? Well, I don't understand. If this is the post-partisan president, where is it?
Meanwhile, Republicans are digging their heels in and saying, we don't want revenue increases. And you have Republicans within their own party. You have Fred Barnes and you have Bill Kristol saying, hey, wait a second, we're in danger of looking like we're defending the wealthiest and saying we don't care about the middle class. Those are Republicans saying that.
Except that they're also saying that if the Republicans give on that, the Democrats have to give on the entitlement spending. I got to wrap it up there, but this is a very fiery debate. You can see probably what's going on behind closed doors as well. Margie and Ron, have a fantastic week.
Thanks,
Gretchen. Appreciate it.
Next on the rundown, how can you make your relationship work?